Hi everyone, and welcome to our paper. We're thrilled to be part of the conference in times when internationalization at home is more important than ever to foster global peace, global citizenship, and inclusive ways to belong. I'm presenting this paper with two of my colleagues from Manchester Metropolitan University in the UK, Dr. Rachelle Viader-Knowles, who is the head of international for the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Rachel Kelly, who's a reader in design education and the international lead for the Department of Design, and myself, Benedicte Brahic. I'm a senior lecturer in sociology and the international lead for the Department of Sociology. Our paper today is entitled Towards an In-pact Approach to Internationalization at Home, Capturing Stories of Impact in collaboration with students and educators in context. This paper is very much grounded in our practice, and we hope it can resonate with yours and foster wider discussions as part of the conference. I'm now turning to my colleague Rachel for some introductory pointers to our paper.
Thank you, Benedicte, and thank you to the conference for including us in this important conversation. So our presentation today will cover three themes. Firstly, we're going to look at the current parameters of evaluation and the opportunities and gaps in current approaches. Secondly, we will present some practice examples which explore the impact of different IAH approaches, in particular within COIL. And thirdly, we'll be stepping back to consider the many students, strands and experiences of IAH which ought to be captured in the evaluation of impact. So without any delay, I will pass you over to my colleague Rachelle Viader-Knowles.
I joined Manchester Met as Faculty Head of International in 2019 as planning commenced towards the University Strategy Refresh. And my first task was to work at institutional level towards a bold and comprehensive commitment to move from a mobility-only strategy for 5% of the students to an internationalisation of the student experience opportunity for all students. We're defining internationalisation of the curriculum to include three categories of activity: physical student mobility, virtual student mobility, including COIL and other kinds of virtual activity, and other internationalisation at home teaching and learning practice to include, for example, working with diverse communities here in Manchester. So to support the strategic rollout of internationalisation at home in Arts and Humanities, we have a subgroup of our Arts and Humanities Internationalisation Committee and three defined projects we're working on. The first is COIL and virtual mobility development. That's the three of us in this presentation here today. And we're working together to develop models of COIL, training and support, our evaluation approach, and the scholarship of internationalisation at home. And then we also have a Go Global Week and an array of cultural events that we offer each year. And so all of this really has to work to support the university's education strategy. Here it is here in a nutshell. And these are the lead indicators that support us along the way and we really need to be able to make sure that with our approach, with our COIL projects, etc., that we are mapping in to these lead indicators to ensure that internationalisation at home is doing its work to support excellent education at Manchester Met. Now, this is EVI, which Manchester Met has developed. It's a complex evaluation tool using an algorithm that measures the impact of teaching interventions for students in a broad set of demographic groups against the education lead indicators towards improving the university's KPIs. But it's understood that EVI in isolation is not going to work well for all innovations, and such quantitative tools fail to capture the vibrancy and value, the insights and practice of the internationalisation at home approach that we're working to build. an approach that encourages disciplinary difference and a translocal dialogue between students and academics with partner institutions across geographies and cultural differences. One critique of approaches such as EV is that a pedagogy such as COIL, evaluation sits only with the outcome of students on one side. So conversely, we are drawn to methods of evaluation that capture the impactful insights of students and academics working together in the translocal learning space. So I'll conclude my section with this point of reference that has been an important one for my thinking around the space of learning we're trying to achieve in projects such as COIL in Arts and Humanities, defined by Kudo et al. As the space for translocal learning where collective learning can take place. And that collective learning, Benedicte, Rachel and I shorthand as where the magic happens.
Thank you, Rachelle. As we've seen, there are plenty of possibilities and scope for innovation in internationalisation at home, and I'm now going to take a deeper dive into some of our initiatives. Okay, so the first and most recent project I will present captures some of the scope and potential of COIL impact evaluation. The project design in this COIL nurtured the forms of silent spaces which professional art and design practice often requires. The portal through which our students travelled was the result of 6 months discussion and planning. In particular, the discussion between academics was around how to support shy, neurodivergent and internationally inexperienced students to participate. The project in the end took place outside of the formal curriculum, therefore co-reflection in this instance will be the best way to capture the impact of this project. I should mention that I am also undertaking an EdD to explore specifically how COIL intersects with or challenges ethical internationalisation principles. My study involves a practitioner focus group, and we're exploring some of the tensions which you can see described in this diagram here, in particular referring to Pashby and Andreotti's ethical internationalisation heuristic. But I am specifically looking at the forms of blind spots which educators have in COIL, or which COIL raises in educators. And I'm really asking how we can understand through this process how educators can learn more about themselves and their worlds through this form of education. So the opportunities I see in educators are manifested in the manner in which they co-develop and plan a COIL. But in students, the impact is often best measured through their reflective activity. In this reflective assessment example, a student really deeply engaged in the collaboration with their Indian peers. And when the student visited an Indian textile market in Manchester, attempting to assimilate, she unknowingly spoke in Hindi instead of English, leading to a really rich, transformative moment of self-awareness. This cultural intelligence in action raises a consideration that while we are throwing students into the deep end with COIL, perhaps sometimes educators are lacking the confidence or experience to support such reflexive education practice, and thus their impact evaluations can feel somewhat vulnerable. So if we acknowledge the need for evaluation And we also acknowledge that gaps in academic experience exist. We must also ask, what are we measuring these deficits against? Is measurement the correct approach, or are there other ways to capture the rich cultural level impacts we think are being surfaced through internationalisation at home? The lead indicators for students in our institution have no intersection with educator evaluations, nor are cultural competencies referenced specifically, albeit measuring a sense of good belonging is a good start. Perhaps there is an opportunity for this, and my colleague Benedicte will conclude this presentation with her insights. Over to you, Benedicte.
In the context of this paper, I want to talk about two trends that are currently taking place in higher education. The first one is around the global turn or the international turn in higher education. And the second one is around the evaluation turn. As I'm sure many of you will agree, there's a strong impetus now to understand the value of various educational initiatives. At MMU, we have, as we've seen earlier, a model to evaluate the education initiatives that we put in place. And one of the things that model does is providing an impetus and a systematic way and a consistent way to evaluate educational initiatives. However, as you may have noticed earlier when Rachelle was discussing EV, the EV model, which is our evaluation model at Manchester Met, the EV model doesn't make any explicit references to international initiative. It seems that it hasn't quite taken the international turn that the wider sector has turned. So there seems to be a bit of a lag between what we see in practice and the way in which we think about evaluation. When listening to Rachel's account of COIL, for example, when listening to some of the experiences that you may have seen in your own practice around initiatives you may have conducted in terms of internationalization at home, one of the things that is really striking is the richness of what's happening. Indeed, maybe for the institution, there's a strong emphasis on employability, but for educators, we see that there's much more than that at stake. And for students, that's, again, another set of feedback that comes to us, and the experiences around internationalizations from home seem very, very complex, very diverse, and almost personal to those different groups and the different stakeholders. And that's when we thought, okay, that's what we see in our classes, that's how we feel about this. However, when evaluating with the tools we are given, it doesn't quite work. And that's when we decided to bring in co-production in evaluation. So our idea, and it's something we are very much seeking to develop and nurture, is to bring in all the stakeholders from our institution, from our partner institutions, into the evaluation process so that we can collectively identify measures to narrate the impact that the institution, but also the tutors, the educators, the practitioners, and the students across the different across the borders, across the different institutions, across the different locations, that impact that they feel and that matters to them. So we want to take the global turn, and we want to take indeed the evaluation turn, but we really need to bring the two in sync, and that's very much what we seek out to do with our impact strategy, where collectively, collaboratively, in a participatory fashion, through the mechanics and the tools and the ethos of co-production, we work together to narrate each other's impact. So that's our hope, and that's what we seek out to do, and that's what we propose and advocate for as part of this paper.